Good evening, everyone. It's 6:31. It's all the meeting to order. Want to call the roll, please?
Director Kennett.
Here.
Director Flotter.
Here.
Director Chapman.
Here.
Director Annabelle.
Here.
Director Alexander.
Here.
Director Potter.
Here.
Director Gill.
And
Right. Full house, we have everybody here tonight. I understand we have new staff introductions, and then I guess we also have new, well, not a new person, but someone from the old person never attended a meeting in person. So thanks for that. And everyone. So who's going to do? Lee's going to introduce church. Okay, got it.
Director Chapman. Good evening, directors. Lee Rapture, Assistant General Manager for Administrative and Field Operations. In the agency's ongoing commitment to creating next generation leaders this fiscal year, we initiated a paid part-time internship program aimed at supporting individuals who are early in their careers and giving them an opportunity to apply their talents to the open space field. We budgeted and filled 2 positions, one in accounting and one in public affairs. And so it's my pleasure tonight to start our introductions with John Yo, who is our accounting intern. Prior to coming to the authority, John served for 4 years in the Marine Corps, where he was responsible for a variety of financial and logistical duties, such as creating financial statements, reviewing and managing supply requests for things like radios, trucks, tents, and rifles, things he doesn't have to worry about here, and tracking shipping data. His body of work earned him the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, and he's currently attending classes to earn his associate's degree at DeAnza. He reports directly to Justina and has been working really closely with Elisa D'Angelo, our staff accountant. John, you want to say a few words?
Good evening, everyone. My name is John, and I'm currently a student at DeAnza College. And I already learned so much from the staff at the OSA already, and I look forward to learning more and contributing to the mission. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
welcome.
And with that, I think Anna Marie would like to introduce our next intern.
Good evening, members of the board. Anna Marie Pilon, Community Engagement Coordinator with the Open Space Authority. So I'd like to introduce Adeline Huddy. She is our new public affairs intern. She comes from Stanford, where she's currently a student, and she can tell us a little bit more about what she's studying because it's a pretty cool field. So she's helping us with all kinds of communications and public affairs work, specifically on social media and some of our campaigns around the 30th anniversary and the CV Camp Coyote Valley Master Plan. And already she's kind of like right off the bat been just awesome and fitting right in. I kind of joke if you interact with the social media of the Open Space Authority, I used to say it's going to be me, but now it's a lot of times going to be her. So she's been engaging with our followers, writing great content. Really happy she's here. So I will pass it over.
Hi, good evening. I'm Adeline Huddy. Like Anna Marie said, I'm a student at Stanford right now. I'm studying symbolic systems, which is a mix of CS, linguistics, and philosophy. So it's a really interesting interdisciplinary major that has a lot of connections to communications. And I've always loved being outdoors, and I love that now I have the opportunity to help other people get the access to the outdoors through the Open Space Authority and our social media and other like community engagement. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I didn't realize till I walked into the room tonight that our council has never actually been here at the Open Space Authority at 33 Las Colinas in person. So I'd like to introduce Antoinette Rainett, who is with Whitmer Parkin LLC, and Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Antoinette, I'm sure most of you are already familiar with me through all the Teams meetings and the emails and stuff, so it's nice to finally see everyone in person.
Welcome. So now we go to this part. So announcement regarding the items to be discussed in closed session will be prior to closed session. Right? Okay.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
Perfect. be an engineer side of the project. It's just kind of, yeah,
Hi, Curtis.
so you know what I mean? Yeah.
Hello,
Hi. The board members are in closed session at the moment.
understood. I was targeting around 7 o'clock, a little bit early here, so I'm happy to wait.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Curtis. Lucas.
Lucas?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. I don't have any names on the screen here. Everyone is presenter right now, so. So, yeah, happy to join you though.
Doesn't look like they're doing anything.
Hi, Linda, this is Caroline. Thanks for joining us. The board is currently in closed session right now.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
All right, at this point, so we're back in closed session. Are there any reportable actions?
No reportable actions.
Okay. All right. We're on to public comments. Do we have anybody that wishes to address the board on any matter not on the agenda? Speakers are limited to 3 minutes.
They're done.
Okay, thank you. All right. Now we're on to approval of minutes.
I moved to approve the March 9th minutes, first board meeting.
I'll second.
We have a motion to approve the March 9th meeting minutes. The director Kenneth and the second by Director Ann. You ready? I'll call the roll. Okay.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annable,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Now we need a motion to, so that was only, yes, for the second meeting for the joint board and citizens advisory committee meeting minutes.
I so move.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the March 9th joint board meeting, citizens advisory special meeting. With Director Alexander and the second by Director Kent.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annable,
Yes.
Director Alexander.
Yes.
All right. Now we're on to the consent calendar. Anybody wish to pull any item from the consent calendar for discussion?
Approval of the consent items. Second.
I presume there's no public comment on the consent calendar.
There's none.
Okay, all right. A motion approved by Mike Potter. And Director Gill, second. Okay.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annable,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Yeah, so now we are on to new business, which is the first item is to consider adoption of the California Environmental Quality Act documents for the Loggers Creek Bridge and Day Use Area Project approval and authorization to execute participating special entity agreement with the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency. Have somebody, it's a mouthful, but you're gonna get that CEQA language in there, right? All right. Then I think you're gonna present. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll both be presenting.
All right, wonderful.
Thank you, directors, for being here this evening. As Director Chapman mentioned, here to present several items related to the approvals for Yagas Creek Bridge and Day Use Area Project. I'll get going. Again, Lucas Shalom, our planning manager, Jennifer Hooper, Associate Open Space Planner. We also have joining us virtually Curtis Alling with Descent Environmental, who is our environmental consultant for the preparation of the CEQA documents, as well as our biologist for the project. So tonight we're going to begin with a brief overview of the project. We've shared this project with the board several times, and it really hasn't changed since the last time we were out there was not too long ago, actually on site. So tonight we will begin with an overview of the project, discuss the CEQA process and conclusions associated with that, and then also the permitting and participating special entity agreement with the Habitat Agency. So there's three things we're asking the board to consider this evening. Again, that's the initial study, mitigated negative declaration, and MMRP, mitigation and monitoring reporting plan for the project. We're asking the board to consider approval of the Yagas Creek Bridge day use area, as we will describe tonight. And then third is authorization of the participating special entity agreement with the Valley Habitat Agency for our project. So a reminder on the project goals, first and foremost, to expand the public access on the preserve and to create a connection over Yagas Creek. And I'll talk a little bit more about the location and why that's important. To install the project, the bridge over Yagas Creek will serve both a public access need as well as an operational need for our staff. And then we're looking at the creation of a day use meadow in the former Blair Ranch property, opening up this larger portion of the property, connecting to utilizing our existing facilities. And then to create, very importantly, is to create a new accessible space to help meet our JEDIA goals, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility at the Open Space Authority, and expand our existing portfolio of accessible spaces through accessible interpretation and accessible paths and access. So, as I mentioned, we brought this to the board and CAC public meeting several times. This is the list, the background. I won't read through them, but last time we were out there on a really nice evening last summer with the board of directors to look at the bridge location and meadow facilities. So the project is located at our Rancho Cañada del Oro Preserve. The Rancho Cañada del Oro Preserve portion that's open is about 5,400 acres, including about 12 miles of multi-use trail. There's an existing staging area that also has equestrian parking, restroom facilities, as well. Adjacent to that is an accessible loop trail. It's actually an ADA accessible loop trail, which is one of a really great asset for the Open Space Authority. The 1,800 acre former Blair Ranch property is directly adjacent to that 5,400 acres. We do not currently have public access to that property, and it's separated by the Yagas Creek, which you see here. On the upper right with the P is our existing parking lot and equestrian staging area, and the half-mile Yagas Creek Loop Trail, which is the ADA accessible trail. Separated from, at the bottom of the screen, is the former Blair Ranch property, separated by Yagas Creek. So this project will bridge over the creek to connect the property, and then allow access to this new meadow loop trail, which is also an accessible facility that will connect to the existing loop trail within the meadow with a very different feel. It will be a natural paved surface, which is stabilized decomposed granite to fit in with the setting. As most of you have been back there, you feel really disconnected from the developed spaces in urban areas when you're back here. And so you really are in nature. So the intent is to keep it feeling that way with all the amenities. So it's sort of this different kind of accessible space that we envision. Our educational programs out there, there's several nodes along. There'll be accessible interpretation, including non-written types of interpretation, and the accessible loop trail that also goes through some of the trees and experiences. This is a rendering of what that looks like, which many of you have seen before. And I will now pass it off to Jennifer Hooper to continue.
All right, thank you, Lucas, and good evening, directors. Again, Jennifer Hooper, Associate Open Space Planner.
Oh, sorry, I do have two more. Wanted to end on the pretty slide. So very quick reminder on the budget. The one unknown here, as you all are aware, construction costs have gone up. And so really we'll be bringing that item back to the board, and that'll be kind of the variable here. But right now we're tracking about a $1.3 million total project budget, which we have secured $1.12 million from California State Parks for. And the schedule, anticipating the next round of design and construction documents to be completed in the next few months here, next couple months here, and then get the full project out to bid. The actual bridge fabrication portion of the project is out to bid right now. And so that'll be coming back to the board as well as the construction contract once once we have received bids for that. Now I will pass it off to Jennifer Hooper.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna go over the CEQA process and permitting. Right, so I'm gonna go over CEQA and permitting. And then next steps for the project here. So the authority released a draft initial study along with a notice of intent to adopt a mitigated negative declaration on January 24th with a 30-day public comment period ending on February 24th, 2023. We filed these documents with the state and county, distributed to interested parties, including responsible agencies, as well as preserve neighbors, and then posted the notice of intent at the preserve, in the newspaper, at the authority's administrative office, and on the website. So the initial study included potentially significant impacts in the following areas: air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, and tribal cultural resources. It was determined that these would all be could be mitigated to levels less than significant with mitigation measures such as construction operations, including like dust abatement and idling time, limiting those, conducting pre-construction surveys for birds and other special set of species, and then completing things like cultural resource sensitivity training, and steps to follow in the event that an unanticipated tribal cultural resource was identified during construction. So staff is recommending, again, adoption of the initial study and mitigated negative declaration tonight, along with the associated mitigation monitoring and reporting program, as well as project approval. So on to Habitat Agency permitting. The Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority is a participating special entity. And so we permit directly with the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency. So permitting with the Habitat Agency looks like these series of steps, including completing biological resource surveys at the site to identify vegetation and any known species present. Calculating impacts associated with the design and project footprint and fees based on those disturbance area calculations, submitting the application to the Habitat Agency for their review, along with the wildlife agencies, including the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. The permit was approved with these conditions. And these include things like water quality, best management practices, in-stream avoidance and minimization measures, maintaining fuel buffers around built features, and then pre-construction surveys for species including least Bell's vireo and tricolored blackbird. So permit fees associated with the Habitat Agency are around $25,000, approximately $25,000. And so staff is recommending authorization to execute the agreement with the Habitat Agency tonight. Other permits completed for the project, including the lake and streambed alteration, which was deemed complete by operation of law with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. The notice of applicability for a general waste discharge permit with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the Habitat Agency permit I just described, and then an exemption for permitting through the City of San Jose. So next steps would be to complete design and construction documentation, and then issue a request for bids for construction of the project, bring that contract back to the Board of Directors for ultimately approval, and to begin construction. And we can now take any questions. Yeah.
We have one member of the public, Shani Kleinhaus, who would like to speak. Shani Kleinhaus, please go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Shani Kleinhaus, and I'm the environmental advocate for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. And together with the Sierra Club, we submitted comments on the mitigated negative declaration. When we looked at the MND, we noticed that there were mitigations for Crouch bumblebee, and the mitigation was to look for nests of colonies of this specific endangered bumblebee. And so we started looking on the web to see what do these nests look like. And apparently nobody knows. Not only that, but the bee can also nest in just about anywhere. They can be in a rodent nest, in the ground, under a rock, on a tree, under the bark, in a nest of a bird in the tree, basically almost any kind of structure. So we submitted comments asking, what type of biologist would be able to find these nests if they are on the property. And the staff response is, well, when we look for a contractor, then we'll find out the right kind of biologists who can perform this task of finding these nest colonies. But since nobody knows what they look like, and not only that, almost no one knows how to identify the bee itself, I think that, need to, at least from the Open Space Authority, I would expect to have criteria of what should such biologists know, how that they should be able to identify the bee itself and potentially the nest as well, although I'm not sure how they would do that. But the other thing is that the Habitat Agency the fees don't cover the Crouch bumblebee. I think in their update they will, but right now they don't. So I was thinking that at the very least there should be some habitat enhancement for the bee. And the bees seem to, from the research I've done, be very, they use milkweed and other species of flowering plants, but they really have an affinity to milkweed. So planting those would help the monarchs as well. So I'm just thinking that, for the OSA, I would expect to do more than just, yeah, we'll send a biologist. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I just want to ask, do you want to respond to the public comment, or should we take comments from the board first?
I think we have to get you
Sure.
a response.
Yeah, we have heard that it can be difficult. Not all biologists are qualified to do pre-construction surveys for the Crouch bumblebee. We confirmed with our on-call biologists that they do have biologists on staff that are qualified to do surveys for the Crouch bumblebee.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions from the board? Director Gamble?
I was just trying to understand where the existing bridge is that goes on the west end of the property. Is this replacing that bridge entirely, or is that bridge still there? Because I didn't see it in the diagram.
I think they're
Shows.
Why? I don't think.
So this bridge is not replacing the current one. The current one will stay in its current location. When that bridge was built, we were looking at a different trail alignment and use of the property at that time, and it was also replacing the structure that was less than ideal that the residents above our property would use to cross the August Creek during high flow events. So that one is still staying there for our residents to be able to use for those high flow events.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, do you want, I could point it out.
Okay, and then the other side, I just wanted, in response to Ms. Kleinhaus's comment about habitat enhancement, is that something you guys have, I see you nodding, considered?
Yes, so we will be realigning about 200 feet of existing cattle exclusion fencing that's adjacent to Yagas Creek. And so by moving it, realigning it, we'll be increasing about, don't quote me on this, but about 4,100 square feet of of area that's currently grazed to allow for natural revegetation of the riparian corridor. Hopefully.
All right, any other questions? No? Okay. Yeah. All right, no other questions? We need a motion.
I'll move to approve. Second.
Okay, now I get to read this into the record again. All right, so we have a motion to consider the adoption of the California Environmental Quality Act documents for the Logus Creek Bridge and Bays area project approval and authorization to execute the participating special entity agreement with the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency. The director Maher, no, Kenneth Maher, got it. Need to call roll? 1 second.
Just to clarify, we're moving the first resolution, is that correct? Okay. Okay, and then the mover?
Kenneth
And the second?
Maher.
You?
Put your fingers at each other.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annabelle,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter.
Yes.
I agree with that.
Oh, you're kidding.
Vote is counted.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Okay. Now we have a second. Right, all right. Okay, so the next resolution is, this would be the authorization of the gentleman to execute the participating special entity agreement for the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, correct? Yes, no?
Project approval.
The project approval,
Project approval.
approving the Yoggins Creek Bridge and Day Use Area project.
There we go. 23, 21. Okay, this is the, okay, so we need a motion to approve the Logus Creek Bridge and Davies. Water, no, we have to break it into 3. They're making my life complicated. No, they were not, they're punching buttons over here.
So the, Dr. Dale moved and Dr. Potter, Director Potter seconded.
Correct. All right.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman.
Yes.
Director Annabelle,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Dale.
Yes.
All right, now resolution 23-22. Which is the authorization general manager to execute participating special entity agreement with the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency. And who can hit the button first? All right, so we need a motion.
I second.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion from Director Kenneth, with a second from Director Alexander.
No buttons.
No button.
Why is the no button?
Gonna have to do this the old fashioned one.
I don't know. This will again.
I'm sorry, who was the mover?
And
Kenneth Alexander.
Okay, Director Kenneth moved and Director Alexander seconded. Director Kenneth,
yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annabelle,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
and Director Dale.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. All right.
Thank you, directors.
All right, the next item.
Just have one quick question. I got so excited about it. When was the construction plan to be complete?
completed? That's, I know you mentioned it, but I might have missed that.
Before October.
For October 15th of this year. Okay, great.
There's, I understand there's like certain permitting areas, right?
Yeah, we
Okay.
have a between then that goes into one.
So 2023, that's great.
All right. Right, the next item is an informational item, the Coyote Valley Conservation Area Master Plan Engagement Update, and it's Nick Perry. Here.
All right, good evening, directors. Nick Perry, Coyote Valley Project Manager. This is my first in-person board meeting, so nice to be here in person, see you all not in the boxes on the screen. Excited to present tonight an update on not only the Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Plan, or CV Camp for short, but also some related projects in the Coyote Valley area. And I'm joined here tonight, my colleagues Lena Ian and Aaron A. Berrigan that co-present with me tonight, so you'll be hearing from them shortly. So tonight's presentation, we're going to give an update on the master plan, some project background, our engagement approach, and I'll walk through phases and milestones that we anticipate over the next few years for the master plan. Then we'll talk about some related projects and updates related to those, and then time for question and discussion after that. So I always like to start with this image. I believe our own Derek Newman took this up on a plane somewhere. Is that right, Derek? So looking west towards the Santa Cruz Mountains over Coyote Valley, this amazing landscape that we're all working so hard to protect and plan for, and all the benefits that it provides, which you all have heard about many times, so I'm probably not going to read through each of them today. But the focus of the master plan is really the conserved lands. And we now have over 1,500 acres of protected lands on the valley floor. 2019, the North Coyote Valley Conservation Area, and since then, the lands that have been conserved in Mid-Coyote Valley along the course of Fisher Creek, leading into the historic Laguna Seca. And that is the focus of all the planning work that the Open Space Authority is doing right now. So our project team, the CV Camp, is managed by the Open Space Authority in close partnership with the two other land owning entities that own some of those green blobs I showed in the previous slide, Peninsula Open Space Trust, Post, and the City of San Jose. In late 2021, we hired our consultant team led by the firm SWCA. And you see a whole alphabet soup of other sub-consultants that we're working with that the team has assembled to help us cover everything from hydrology and hydraulics to wildlife biology to transportation planning, engineering, engagement, economics. So it's a great team that we've been working with over the past year. We also have a variety of partners and advisors working closely with. We have County Parks who actually contributed to the planning project. We're working closely with the Valley Habitat Agency, Valley Water, and we've recently formed a science advisory group for the CV Camp, which has 18 members, primarily from academia, also some folks from Valley Water, Habitat Agency, and other local experts in fields like biology, paleo, ethnobotany, so like how historic indigenous communities did land stewardship, and more. So really excited to begin working with those folks in the spring. The planned goals of the project team defined, there are 10. I won't read them all today, but they include the conservation values that drove the protection of the landscape, which is the wildlife habitat ecological connectivity that Coyote Valley provides, the unique water resources that exist in the landscape like Laguna Seca that we want to conserve and restore and manage. Improving access to public health. We're in the 10th largest city in the country. We have this amazing open space right at its doorstep. How can we allow people to enjoy and benefit from that landscape? We want to respect and honor and interpret all the unique resources in the area, support local agriculture. And one of the things we've really been working on over the past year is community engagement, and how do we foster ongoing and inclusive community engagement, not only through the planning process, but forever through the landscape itself. And so to talk more about our engagement approach, I'm going to turn it over to Lena.
Great, thank you, Nick. And good evening, directors. Lena Ian, Community Impact and Policy Specialist. So one of the first tasks related to our engagement our team worked on was to think about potential audiences. And we worked hard to identify over 500 potential stakeholder organizations and groups, sorting them into broad categories based on anticipated level of interest and engagement. So very broadly speaking, we've sorted engagement audiences into 3 primary groups. First, internal stakeholders, including the 3 project site landholders, the Open Space Authority, Post, and the City of San Jose, and those 3 agencies' staff, elected officials, and advisors like the CAC. For external stakeholders, those are entities that have jurisdiction or oversight over the project site and might be involved in its approval, funding, or regulation. These include partner agencies like the Habitat Agency or Valley Water, our local tribal governments, and state and federal regulators. And I'm realizing that's the slide I'm talking about. And lastly, for community audiences, are groups and individuals that may not have direct jurisdiction, but who we want to invite to participate in the planning process. They range from local to environmental advocacy groups to the wide range of nonprofit or community-based organizations from throughout our jurisdiction who serve communities that care about or could benefit from Coyote Valley's protected lands. So generally, we are talking about community engagement. This audience is our primary focus. So moving onto this slide, after spending time thinking through our engagement audiences, our team defined the level of engagement the general public might have in the planning process. The purpose of doing this is to be clear, transparent, and honest when it comes to our promises to the public and how their input will shape our plans. That way we can be respectful of their time and capacity and set clear expectations from the start of the project. To do this, we use the International Association for Public Participation's engagement spectrum shown here on the screen. The IAP2 spectrum defines a range of engagement levels from the most basic form of engagement where you simply inform the public on a decision that's being made to the most intensive level engagement where you empower the public to make its own decision that you will implement. No one level of engagement is inherently better than the other. What's key is matching the right level with the context of the project. And animation, nicely done. Looking broadly at the CV camp, the general public's level of engagement falls primarily in the middle of the spectrum under the consult or involve categories, where our promise to the public will be to listen to their ideas and share how their input will influence the decision. And again, this is with the general public in mind. Key stakeholder groups like our local tribes will have greater levels of engagement for the aspects of the project that are most important to them. So then for defining the general public's decision-making space, using the engagement spectrum as a guide, our team has defined 16 broad decision-making spaces where engagement with the general public is a key component. So to highlight just a few examples, for habitat restoration approaches, the level of engagement will fall mostly under the inform category. We will make sure that the public is made aware of habitat restoration opportunities and constraints, kept informed of plans for restoration and management, and made aware of future opportunities to engage as volunteers. For trail routing, the level of engagement will fall mostly under the consult category, where there is more than one viable option for trail routing or design. Public input will influence which options are advanced. And for interpretive features, the level of engagement will fall mostly under the involved category and will work with the public to define which features and topics are prioritized for interpretation. And again, this is very generalized, and these decision-making spaces were defined with the average member of the public in mind. We may hear from a member of the public that is an expert in, say, habitat restoration, and we'd certainly welcome and consider their input. But when it comes to engaging the general public, we wouldn't necessarily have a survey question asking people which plants to plant in the wetland, as one example. Our team would make a decision like that based on the latest science and best practices available. And then moving towards this preliminary engagement overview. This provides a high-level overview of our community engagement work so far. So we kicked things off in 2020 when we began working with Scansion, our community engagement advisor, and our focus was on better understanding the needs and experiences of the diverse communities throughout our jurisdiction. We did this by focusing on questions like, how do we engage diverse communities? What does robust engagement mean to us and to the community? And what are the most important values and how will we reflect those through our work? In 2021, we were able to start initiating conversations and early relationship building efforts with local tribes, local community leaders and staff, and community-based organizations. In the spring, the Discover Coyote Valley webinar series was the first major opportunity to share what we've been working on with the public. The focus in 2022 was building out the full consultant team and laying the groundwork for what public engagement will look like throughout the project. Over the summer, the team completed the final draft of the Outreach and Engagement Plan, which is intended to provide all project team members with an understanding of the engagement process, goals, and measures of success. We also began hosting listening sessions with representatives from community-based organizations to learn more about their work in the communities they serve. So far, we've met with Health Trust, Vegilution, Asian Americans for Community Involvement, or ACI, Communiversity, Latinos United for a New America, or LUNA, Amigos de Guadalupe, and La Mesa Verde. The information gathered through these sessions will help guide the project team's future planning and engagement.
And we're in the process of distilling key takeaways from these listening sessions, but some of the key lessons that we've heard so far include people appreciate the opportunity to engage early and often. Transparency and clarity up front will help to build trust over time, and to really value the time that people can give and respect the varying levels of interest. So now we're going to shift gears and talk about our project timeline, including major milestones for public engagement. But before we do, I want to share some of the ongoing engagement we already have in the works that will carry throughout the project. So we're actively responding to any requests to provide informational presentations on the project to community groups. We have a project-specific email listserv with over 600 subscribers that we're looking to grow as we have more events. We have a project website with content translated into Spanish and Vietnamese. And we work closely with the authorities communications team to include CV Camp content in our newsletter and social media. And we work closely with our volunteer and educational teams to include CV Camp content in our events and programs. We also hope to build partnerships with local museums and educational institutions, and are in early discussions with organizations like the California Academy of Sciences on a potential partnership. And we're planning a public event in Coyote Valley at Spreckles Hill on Earth Day, and are also planning a Coyote Valley Neighbors Focused event sometime in the spring. And so now I'll turn it back to Nick and to run through a timeline of major project phases and milestones.
Thank you, Lena. I just want to acknowledge Lena's been doing, in addition to all our other duties, been doing an amazing job, like really spearheading a lot of this engagement work directly with the community. So thank you. So this graphic shows our project timeline, and it divides the project into 9 major phases, which I'm going to kind of briefly walk through. And as Lena mentioned, I'll walk through the major milestones and deliverables we expect in each phase, and also the major public touch points that we'll have for engagement. But looking at this big picture, really what we're looking at in 2025, writing the plan, 2026, doing the environmental review documents, and starting to implement in 2027. So we have a bit of a road ahead of us. We're working as fast as we can, and I'll now talk about what we'll be doing each of those phases. So phase 1, project startup, is complete. That was what we were working on last year. That was onboarding our consultant team, refining our scope, schedule, and budget, creating the public engagement plan that Lena just mentioned, giving our team that we hired all the wealth of reports and data and work that's already been done in Coyote Valley, and making sure they understood it and synthesized it, resulting in a data gaps memo, which basically was them digesting all that work and telling us, here are the things we need to do to start to do the future planning work we want to do. And Lena already mentioned the public engagement that we did during this phase, so I won't really go into the details there, but it was really about laying the foundation for long-lasting relationships we hope to build through this planning process. Phase 2, what we're calling Understanding Coyote Valley. This is in progress. And this will result in an existing conditions report that fills all those data gaps that the consultants identified in the previous phase, doing things like wildlife surveys and hydrological studies that will really help us understand the landscapes so we can plan its future. In phase 2, we're planning a lot of interesting and exciting engagement. We're going to be holding justice, equity, and diversity inclusion focused focus groups with key community members that maybe don't typically get involved in typical planning processes. So we're going to be doing Spanish in language focus groups, Vietnamese in language focus groups, a youth focus group with members of the Morgan Hill Youth Commission and San Jose Youth Commission, hopefully, and a seniors focused focus group, so that we can get those perspectives in instead of just maybe the typical folks who might come to like a typical workshop. And then Earth Day, which I'll talk about more in a minute. So a closer look at phase 2, since this is the phase we're in. Really every aspect of the master plan has something going on in this phase. The wildlife folks are doing surveys right now, trying to figure out what special status species might be out in the ponds and creeks. The hydrology folks are trying to figure out where all that water is going right now. The public use and access folks are going to be doing assessments of, parking lot capacity and user surveys to figure out how the current public preserves near the Coyote Valley area are currently being used. And it goes on. So all these site assessments and studies are going to feed into what will be some tools that we'll use to start to do our, really fun planning work. So we're going to be developing project restoration uses and objectives, decision making matrix to figure out how do we weigh different approaches, a map that kind of condenses all of this so the planners can use it to figure out like where things might work where, and that summary report, which we hope to have towards the end of this year. And so since this is about existing conditions, I thought it would be fun to play a little video that is also from Derek, drone footage of the January atmospheric river and its effects on Coyote Valley. because it's really been a dramatic change in the landscape that we've been able to witness firsthand. And so since we acquired the land, this is the first time we've really had a wet year. It's been dry at least since I started working here 2 years ago, but now we can see how water is really collecting and flowing through the landscape. And Aaron might talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but it's really allowing us to understand the landscape better and start to do the planning work we need to do. Because one of the key questions here is, how much water is there? Where is it going? Where do we want it to go? What interventions can we make to achieve our restoration goals? And so right now, this video, if you're not oriented, it's flying south. Santa Teresa is on the left. You can see Spreckles Hill in the center. It's starting to pan towards the west and the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains. And, this was January, but I don't know if any of you were out there in the past couple of days, but it looks like this pretty much right now too, thanks to the recent storms. I need some like calming music to play while this is going on, or maybe a dance I could do, but I don't know, Aaron, anything you want to add while this is playing?
Yeah, this is, obviously a very intense storm in January, kind of New Year's, probably most of you remember this. And, what's interesting to me is this occurred, after a pretty dry year before that. So the groundwater is not particularly high in the storm. Whereas in the most recent storm we had, the one Mick was talking about, that you can see, groundwater is much elevated since then. So this is great information for our team to think about where water will be and why it will be there. Some years we'll have a lot of rain. Some years groundwater will be low. Some years it'll be high. Some years there'll be drought. And so in thinking about our restoration scenario planning, like what do we want to do around Spreckles Hill here? You can see, are these floodplains? Should they be wetlands for frogs? These are the types of sort of planning level decisions we're trying to make. So as we get into the data and all the science and models, just kind of seeing what the land has to tell us right now is a pretty great opportunity.
Thanks, Aaron. And yeah, we've installed gauges all along the course of Fisher Creek that are measuring what the groundwater is doing, what the surface water is doing. We're going to be installing some more on tributaries that are coming off the Santa Cruz Mountains and flowing into Coyote Valley and then into Fisher Creek, just so we can understand how this is all working together. It's now looking north, back towards Laguna Seca. All right, so the next 3 phases of the planning project, or 4 phases rather, are really about creating the vision. So after we finish the existing conditions phase that we're working on this year, starting with the phase we're calling Imagine, where we're setting the restoration and use objectives, we're identifying opportunities and constraints, and we're creating some conceptual visualizations that help us understand how this might look on the landscape. Then moving into 2024, starting to develop alternatives to help us weigh different approaches, and creating a monitoring and adaptive management framework, and starting some initial environmental analysis to understand what the approvals path and the permitting paths might be to achieve this vision. And then in 2025, really narrowing it down to one preferred concept plan that we then work to have environmentally cleared and implemented by 2027. And for public engagement, we imagine 3 rounds of kind of significant public engagement key to those 3 phases of Imagine, Design, and Refine. That include things like workshops, surveys, focus groups, etc. Phase 7 is really just about writing the plan, pretty self-explanatory. And engagement for the later phases, we will kind of develop more detailed plans based on lessons learned from the phases that we're in prior to that. Phase 8, focus on environmental review, finalizing the master plan document, permits and approvals. And then finally, phase 9, working and moving towards design construction documents for early implementation projects. And I will say that while this planning work is going on for the master plan, we are not doing things on the landscape. We're actively pursuing projects that test out things, that pilot ideas, that steward the land, that offer opportunities for people to come and enjoy the land. And to talk about some of those more near-term efforts and some related projects, I will turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you, Nick. Aaron Hebert, Natural Resources Manager. So while Nick is creating this great plan, those of us who are not planners by nature are trying to kind of work in parallel and get some things going as we wade into this much bigger process. So we were just looking at that great aerial footage of Spreckles, and there's a little wetland feature at the toe of Spreckles in between Fisher Creek in it. And we're, probably a month or two out from installing a sort of new outlet to it that's going to keep water levels higher and kind of create that wetland habitat that we're interested in. Similarly, we've been working on several different planting projects along Fisher Creek, kind of from Palm all the way down at Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve to sort of midway up Fisher's Creek near Spreckles. These projects are funded from different grantors. They all sort of enhance riparian habitat, which is good for critters, as well as some of the insects and pollinators that we were talking about earlier. So those are actually a couple little sub projects. And then kind of recently, I think many of us have been driving by Laguna Seca on Santa Teresa and really thinking about, gosh, it's a shame more water isn't being kept in there. That January storm that you saw, a lot of that water actually drawed down pretty quickly, I would say on the order of weeks. And while that's great for flood attenuation, not quite the ideal wetted period for frogs or for wetland habitats or to keep those migratory birds that we see there. So kind of out of this interest in making that habitat function sooner and more effectively, we've created this kind of concept of a stepping stone project, which really looks at keeping water in North Laguna Seca for a longer period of time. So we're engaging the consultant team in that practice, but you can imagine just kind of putting a little a plug like in your bathtub and just keeping it in their logger. It's more complicated than that, but it is sort of the nut of it. And then similarly, a couple of years back in partnership with the city of San Jose and Post, OSA, the authority entered into an agreement to protect Tulare Meadows. And in that, it required a groundwater sustainability study. The city operates 3 municipal wells on that property that supply water to residents. And really, our interest in that is how does that groundwater pumping, which is fairly significant, affect surrounding habitats like some of those groundwater dependent ecosystems in Spreckles and in Laguna Seca. So this is a joint project by the city, Post, and the authority to sort of look at the surrounding ecosystems and the groundwater sustainability per that agreement. And then another project that I'm involved in that the board will hopefully see in the next couple months is looking at a agricultural lease for the Palm Avenue property that is right next to Coyote Valley open space. It's about a 30-acre property in whole, and a sub area of that is proposed for leasing to get that back in agricultural production while preserving a little slice of land for that wildlife corridor that we're planning throughout the valley. So these are some of the things that we're doing in the meantime while Nick and his team are doing this very thoughtful, sophisticated planning. These are some kind of low-hanging fruit projects that we think will be useful no matter what these great plans come up with. Our friends and colleagues at Post are also hard at work helping advance this vision. Principally, they are undertaking a study of Monterey Road with a consultant team that they hired a couple of months ago, Dudek. And they are out there, actually, I think we saw them today, if I'm not mistaken, looking at some of the surrounding habitats of Monterey Road and some of the barriers like the culverts and the median that are preventing wildlife from moving east-west between the 2 mountain ranges. So Post is leading that effort, and I am one of the participants in that study. The other work that they are nearly completed is a North Coyote Valley road ecology study, and this is another basically bobcat collaring study looking at how bobcats move wildlife cameras through the North Coyote Valley area. So this data, I've seen a preliminary version of this report, reiterates a lot of those messages that prior studies show, but highlighting the way that bobcats in particular and coyote use culverts, use gates, use a lot of the infrastructure that you might drive by in Santa Teresa. So now we have a little bit more information about specifically how permeable or how many barriers we have on our lands and surrounding lands. So that'll really enhance the sort of body of knowledge we have about what does a wildlife corridor between the 2 ranges really mean? How do the critters really use it? The other endeavor that Post is leading is a climate resiliency credits program, which at a high level is a program that seeks to quantify some of the climate benefits from the type of work we do, and then to explore sort of financial partnerships with corporations and other entities who might be looking to help fund some climate-friendly practices. There's probably more to it than that, but that's kind of a high-level version of it. So again, there's a lot going on with the master plan, but there are actually a number of other projects that are pretty significant and we're celebrating in the meantime.
Thank you, Aaron. And so finally, some other related projects that aren't being led by the authority are our partners at Post that we are either involved in or tracking closely. There's high-speed rail, of course, which is going right through Coyote Valley if and when it gets built. There's the CAISO Metcalf San Jose B HVDC project, which rolls right off the tongue. But this is an energy transmission line and substation that's going to be built somewhere near the existing power plant that we're closely monitoring and tracking. We don't have too much information on that right now, but we're monitoring it because of its potential impacts in Coyote Valley. San Jose Planning Division is leading the Coyote Corridor study, and that's looking specifically at land uses on the east side of Monterey Road, which we are monitoring and collaborating with them. We're not a part of the project team, but their point person for that project, their project manager, is our point person for the CV camp. So there's a lot of potential overlap at the staff level there. We work with the county, kind of monitor what they're planning on doing in terms of implementing their Coyote Creek Parkway improvements. And we're coordinating with them on their Trails Master Plan update, map update. So these are all projects that kind of are in the sphere of Coyote Valley. And just to kind of illustrate how they all fall together, there's a lot of overlap, especially when you look at the Monterey Road area north of Bailey. You see the Post Monterey Road study, that Metcalf power plant, the high-speed rail, our project, the CV camp. And so there's a lot of parallel efforts happening at the same time in this geography. And to help coordinate them, we've started to convene, Andrea started to convene quarterly meetings where all the different agencies that are working on projects in Coyote Valley are giving each other updates, talking about problems, and working to make sure that we're working together to implement our vision for this important landscape. So finally, I'll just close, encourage you all to join us out there if you're free on Earth Day. We had an Earth Day event last year at Spreckles Hill. We're doing it again this year, assuming we don't get rained out. But the goal is to just welcome people onto the landscape, have fun activities at the base of the hill, have hikes, some of them docent-led to the top of the hill. The project team working on the CV camp will have an information booth with interactive activity. We'll be distributing a survey. So it's kind of the partner to those focus groups I talked about earlier that are focused on making sure specific communities we hear from. This is more of like the big umbrella event that we want people to come to during this phase of the planning project. So with that, I will close and thank you for your time and happy to answer questions.
A general question. So you mentioned the bobcats and the culverts. I'm sure they're tracking that those culverts are full of water right now for the bobcats.
Yes, that is a major consideration that we're looking into. Aaron, I don't know if you want to add more about that.
Yeah, they don't swim very well. So yeah, a lot of the specific retrofits that Post and OSA are looking at some of these culverts is to essentially install a little kind of high elevation bench in some of these larger culverts like under Monterey Road for this exact reason. So maybe not under flood conditions, but under moderate flow conditions, there's a way for critters to move through these features.
Can I add just a point to that? I was going to save it for the general manager's report. We had a really productive meeting just this past week with Peninsula Open Space Trust, VTA, and Caltrans. And we're in discussions to apply for a state conservation grant that would link the feasibility study on Monterey Road with Highway 101 and look at it holistically and potentially include in that the ability for getting Caltrans commitment to work with Valley Water and clear out those culverts on a more regular basis. So this is really exciting and really looking forward to partnering. And one potential outcome could be that VTA takes responsibility for the infrastructure once those decisions are made. So we're, as our staff said tonight, we're not sitting on our hands. We're really actively trying to do some of this work. What do we say? Build the bicycle while we're riding it. Thanks.
Nick, I wanted to bring this, to put Caliso in there. I suggest you talk to our planning department, City of San Jose, because they have met with LS Gregg. They don't know the exact location, but our office has asked to be in direct connection with where that second location is. The first location is on Coleman. So plans are starting to move, and I'm a little bit concerned that they might impact some of the hard work you guys were doing. And I can just imagine, a lot of digging along roads that we don't want dug.
Yeah, we're trying to wrap our heads around that right now and get down to the bottom of it. Thank you for that suggestion. We will
Yes,
talk to
thank
them.
you. Because I really like the idea of this quarterly working group that you have, but maybe in this particular one might be a little faster than quarterly.
Hey, Madam Chair, just again, another topic that I won't save for later, but we've been in contact with the city manager's office at San Jose. We're told that they're going to encourage the selected bidder by CAISO, which is LS Power Grid LLC, to meet with us, but we're actually asking the city to give us the contact information so we can initiate those meetings. Because we had some very productive conversations with one of the other potential bidders on multiple occasions last year. They were not the selected bidder, they were called Next Era Energy. But that bidder was willing to work with us to contribute money toward the Fisher Creek Culvert retrofit. They were willing to contribute money to the Monterey Road median and glare screen retrofit. They had an option on a property that wouldn't have been a problem for our conservation work. And so the message we're going to send is if one of the non-selected bidders was willing to do all of that work and create a self-mitigating environmental document for this important electricity transmission project, then the selected bidder shouldn't be doing any less than that. And so that's what we're going to be working on in the coming weeks.
Thank you. That's excellent. Yes, Dr. Allen.
Is this report to be on, is this report going to be on the website, or can we get it sent to us? Because I'd like to have it for future reference, and it's an excellent report. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, the slideshow will be available online, right, Caroline? Yeah, thank you.
Questions on this side? No? Yes.
To the chair, another comment. I was going to save this for the staff report at the end of the meeting, but it's relevant.
You brought it all up, right?
Yeah. So, as you know, the master planning process is cheap, and we've been working pretty hard to secure funding to support the effort. And so I'm really pleased to report that the State Coastal Conservancy was super impressed with the scope of the master planning process, including the depth and breadth of the community engagement process in particular. And so they are recommending to the board contributing $1.88 million to cover the cost of the community engagement process associated with CV County. And so we're really excited about that. That's a huge chunk of the cost of the planning process. And we anticipate this will go to the Conservancy Board potentially as early as their September or maybe November meeting. So really, really great news. And good job, Nick and Nina and our grants team again.
And so that will fund engagement as well as creating the actual plan document itself. So phase 7 was what they agreed to fund if it gets approved by their board. So very excited about that.
That's fantastic news. That's not a little chunk, that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or anything whether updated at this point? No. Well, thank you, Nick, for the excellent presentation. And the community engagement part I think is really, really important. And so I'm glad that you're laser focused on that. And then you're involving groups. And I really like that you've got separate language going on at the same time, because there's some things that get cost and translation. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's right.
Do I need to run this?
Moving
You
along,
two
next
take care of it.
is we have an information item, Natural Resources Department update from Karen Hebert.
Through the chair, if I could just say a couple of words before Aaron.
Yes.
Sorry, thank you. So with the fiscal year 2022, 2023, budget, the agency invested in our natural resources work and the region's future by establishing our natural resources department and hiring the authority's inaugural natural resources manager, Aaron Hebert, to define and lead this effort. As we knew he would, Aaron dove right in, immersing himself not only in the immediate needs of natural resources work, but applying his experience to look towards the future. We are very excited to see Aaron's passion and drive already paying dividends. And since today marks Aaron's seven-month anniversary, we thought no better gift but a presentation to the board. You're welcome, Aaron, and turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Flattery will get you everywhere, Lee. Yeah, this is timely. I've been here a little over 6 months. We were thinking about the very exciting work plan presentation coming up on the 30th, I think a week from today, and I'll have my time to shine there, but probably would make more sense in context of having a new department and a new program to give it a little more preface. So with that, I'm really here to just kind of share some of my initial thinking about where this department and where the organization is headed with respect to natural resources. And then hopefully next week when we're talking about projects and people and stuff like that, it'll all come together. So first, I want to thank David Mock, who's a natural resources technician in the department. Many of these photos are from him, so it's a hobby of his. So you'll see a lot of these in the presentation here. But so I'm just doing a little bit of sort of mission kind of thinking about what this work is. I'm going to share a little bit of how other organizations do natural resources management. Some of whom I've worked with, many of whom I've worked with actually. Talk about sort of what our core responsibilities are in this department, where are we headed, what are the regional and sort of local opportunities and challenges, and then a little bit of information about future staffing to sort of get at, well, how are we going to do this kind of work? So here's a little bit of visioning and mission statement. This is from actually the Santa Clara Valley Greenprint. And I think it has some good language around what natural resources is about. Protect and manage an interconnected system of wildlands and natural areas to support native habitats and species and to ensure resilience to a changing environment. So, we don't have a mission for my department, but that's a pretty darn good start. And the text below that kind of gets more into that richness of what our sort of special role is here in Santa Clara Valley. And thinking about, when I came here and was thinking, okay, I got to figure out how this department's going to be structured and where it's going to grow and what are the needs for the agency. I thought about my work experiences, but then also my colleagues and friends who work at some of these other organizations. So, one of the big divisions I would say in the natural resources field is whether you work outside all the time or whether you're someone at the desks who does projects, right? That's just kind of a big division of doing large scale restoration, which is lots of projects and permits and the kinds of stuff that Nick was describing, or whether you're someone who's out there every day pulling invasive species. So, looking at these kind of different models, I'll say at MidPenn, my longtime former employer, the natural resources department was mostly folks like myself who worked primarily in the office, went in the field sometimes, sort of managed projects. And then there was a whole other department, really, you could think of it as Derek's department, that did field work, is sort of hands on the ground, boots on the ground, running equipment, pulling weeds. So again, sort of office manager, project manager types, partnering with the folks in the field. State parks is a little bit different. State parks, I should say the other thing about MidPenn is sort of large enough that everyone is kind of a domain expert. And so I'll get into what those experts look like. At state parks, it's a little bit smaller, maybe more, it's a big organization, but actually their funding for natural resources work isn't that big. And so they tend to have blended office and field staff, and then they have sort of dedicated resource crews. So people who do field work, but are focused just on natural resources work. Land trusts, Post is a great example, Semper Virens Fund, Land Trust of Santa Clara Valley. Generally, they are generalists. They sort of do stewardship work, which is kind of a blend of natural resources and maintenance, I would say. And then they work primarily through contractors in order to do things. These are not organizations that typically have a lot in the way of staff to actually do this kind of stuff. So I remember when I started my career at Sempervirens Fund, I was their first stewardship program manager. They owned about 12,000 acres, and that all fell on me. So, it definitely needs a lot more than some of those small organizations can give it. So, here's a little bit of an overview of how MidPenn did things. And this is like a very literalist framework for thinking about natural resources, which is not to critique how they did it, but they sort of broke their expertise into vegetation, wildlife management, and earth sciences. And I was the earth sciences program lead. So that's the one I kind of know the most about. But in vegetation, really what they covered are special status species, like those rare plants I was talking at Mayon-Ayakma, conservation grazing, integrated pest management program. That's the work that David Mock does for us here. Fuels management, forest management, prescribed fire, habitat restoration and maintenance. And then I would say one of the interesting things about vegetation management is when folks volunteer, that is typically the level at which they're working. You're planting in the ground, you're pulling weeds, you're sort of improving habitat through that. So, for folks who work in vegetation, they're often intersecting with the volunteer arms of these organizations. Wildlife, again, special status species, wildlife corridors, habitat restoration. Permitting is a big part of wildlife management because of the Endangered Species Act. You heard about that at the Yagas Creek Bridge project. And then, wildlife, I think, is interesting from a public engagement standpoint because that's really what people want to talk about. If you go to, an event, or if you're tabling something or showing images on the website, public really engages with wildlife. They're less engaged with the plants, even though that's what they tend to be working with. They're thinking about bobcats, they're thinking about mountain lions, and hopefully they're thinking about bay checker spot butterflies. Last but not least is, of course, the earth sciences, where I hail from. Watershed restoration, geology and soils remediation for hazardous materials, climate and adaptation, permitting, and that's really from the Clean Water Act. And then, I think one of the interesting things about this work is it's terribly abstract. You can see a picture at right. This is actually in Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve. Here, one of my predecessors in the water world here, Jake, installed this sort of horizontal rock structure. And basically, it kept the stream into a sort of more natural shape and allowed this water coming down to percolate into the earth. So, I think it's really cool. It is a little bit abstract, but, one of the things that's interesting in thinking about the human connection to it is that people really value clean water. I remember at MidPenn, we did a public survey of why our constituents care about MidPenn's work. And MidPenn is not a water agency, as you know, and actually really top at the list of people's interests was clean water and water quality, which was music to my ears because, sometimes maybe no one knows what I'm doing when I'm doing this kind of project, but actually, many people's values are really connected to this kind of work, even if they don't know exactly what it looks like. At MidPenn, kind of an artifact of history, but they also had cultural resources management and tribal engagements in the earth sciences program. And that just reflected my predecessor as my own work experience. For many organizations like state parks and national parks, cultural resources is its own division. It's its own part of its mission. For many parks agencies or open space agencies, it kind of gets shoehorned in there for better or for worse. And that's sort of a values judgment, I suppose. Here at OSA, at the authority, we have a bunch of domain expertise in vegetation, water resources, wildlife. And then as I'll talk about later, one of the things that we're proposing to do through some staffing is actually to house the agricultural program within natural resources. Some of our shared themes are climate resiliency, biodiversity, and community. Monitoring, adaptation, and partnership are some of those sort of shared values that we have. This department does a lot of interdepartmental work. I remember at my job interview, there was a question of like, how do you do natural resources management? And my answer was actually, we all do natural resources work and we do it in different ways. You heard Jennifer talking about bumblebees and habitat. So, one of the ways that we support this work within the agency is to make smart public access planning. You heard me talk at length the other day about Mayon-Ayakma and the interface of natural resources and public access. Working with our partners in real property to understand the conservation values of lands that we're buying and protecting. Working with the field staff to make sure we're doing the best work we can by the environment and to have them as partners in facilitating that stewardship work. And then working with communications and external affairs on talking about that wildlife that people are so excited to hear about. Without getting into my sort of full vision of what I would like this program to go into, rather than having that sort of vegetation, wildlife, earth science framework, what I'm proposing is two main program areas, community restoration and habitat stewardship. And they're a little bit delineated by some of their values as well as the skill sets therein. Community restoration is really about healing and restoring the human and wildlife connection to the land through projects and community engagement. So earlier I described a sort of skill set that's a lot around project management, doing restoration of streams and wetlands and that kind of stuff. So that's what you can think of as community restoration. One of the things I will note that OSA, I think, has done a really good job of recently in the last years is working with community groups in order to actually do restoration. So the STRAW program with Point Blue is a great example of that. It's very easy to design a project to be built with a bulldozer. That is a very common tool for large scale restoration. But only one person is really involved in that. I think one of the things that's special about these sort of community restoration projects is that kids get their hand dirty, they go to school, they think about it, and then hopefully sometime in the future they're standing here and giving this kind of presentation, right? The other part of natural resources is habitat stewardship. And really the mission is to use positive stewardship interventions to enhance and restore annual cyclical ecosystem functions. So on the one hand, we're doing the big kinds of projects that Nick and I are talking about at CV Camp. On the other hand, there's stuff you do every week, every month, as part of sort of the field work that Derek's team does. So this is a lot of vegetation management, fuels, fire, ecosystem resiliency, conservation grazing, monitoring the landscapes, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a really cute photo. It's sad looking over the fence, but I wanted to frame some of our regional and national conservation challenges and thinking about why we do what we do here in the Santa Clara Valley. Climate change is obviously huge. How that bears down is higher variation in precipitation. So drought years and really wet years, a lot of the local downscaled climate models do predict kind of the thing we've been seeing in maybe the last 10 years, 5-6 years of drought, super wet, more drought, super wet. That may be the new environment. Increased heat stress. So regardless of how wet it is, it's going to be hotter, as we all know, and that affects how plants function. That affects how much water they need, and that affects where plants can be and not be. And, in some, this is sort of like this beguiling concept of an unpredictable future while we are trying to restore to the ecology of the past, right? What is our restoration target is a big challenge in my field. And that, as Nick was highlighting, development, housing, energy, and transportation projects are a thing throughout the state and the nation. And this really results in habitat fragmentation and degradation. I would also say that there is an increasingly complex and expensive regulatory environment around endangered species in particular. You heard earlier about a new bee, right? These types of things happen every year. I think the discipline of ecology uncovers that there are species that are not doing well. There are species on the brink. They get listed and they get protected. They get mitigations in our CEQA documents. I'll say the Valley Habitat Agency, which is updating its plan. You saw the presentation from Edmund the other day. There are new species every time they update that plan. The biggest ones for us within the original plan to today are mountain lion, which roams broadly throughout our territory and is something we care about greatly, and monarch butterfly, which is also potentially ubiquitous. So I think in the well-meaning effort to save and protect those species, we also have regulations to protect those species in all of our work. And so it gets more complicated and expensive to do the stuff we do, unfortunately. Farming, and agriculture also suffer from some of these challenges. Unstable water supplies like we hear about in the San Joaquin Valley, heat stress to plants. So what plants are even appropriate to grow in which region is something that's changing. And then, of course, economic challenges to food production. Here at OSA, in our little corner of the world, I will say some of the opportunities and challenges are implementing this, I think, audacious and compelling vision for a wildlife corridor in Coyote Valley, implementing the large-scale stream restoration in Coyote Valley, Fisher Creek, Laguna Seca, managing vegetation and fuels for habitat resiliency and safety, defining and implementing a vision for OSA's agricultural program. That's a big one. Continuing that community-based restoration and working closely with volunteers and field operations. Delivering public access projects in an ecologically sensitive manner. And then, last but not least is partnership and collaboration. One of the unique things I think about OSA and the Santa Clara Valley is actually the number of stakeholders and partners we have to do this work. It is great to have Valley Habitat Agency caring so much about all those listed species. I'll say at Mid-Penn, for instance, they have to both do all their regular work and sort of carry the water for all the listed species in their area. So here we have a bit of an opportunity to partner with them and others to sort of reach our goals. So in order to do all that important work, I wanted to share a little bit of an outlook for staffing within this program and within my department. And I'll say by way of preface that this is actually the reappropriation of existing salary slots. So there's no new head count here. These are basically unfilled positions that we're turning into things that we need. So first in the queue is a watershed restoration specialist. I described an immense amount of work in the CV camp area in particular that is watershed related. We have projects in the Pajaro. We have projects at Rancho Cañada del Oro. We have a lot of sort of watershed related work. And that would be in that community restoration program area. Next up, maybe later this calendar year, maybe in the next fiscal year, perhaps, is hiring an agricultural specialist. Right now, the agricultural program is kind of diffuse throughout the agency. We all do it a little bit. I think it's fair to say, so hiring someone who really can own it and help us realize that vision, I think is an important thing for delivering OSA's goals. And then a higher level position, last but not least, is a habitat stewardship program manager. I talked about the need for habitat stewardship, and particularly in the vegetation realm of doing fuels management, conservation grazing, IPM work. There's just a lot of stuff you got to do every year to take care of the land in partnership with Derek's team. So they would lead that habitat stewardship program. And they would actually supervise existing staff, our wonderful natural resources technician, David Mock, who leads our IPM program, our integrated pest management program. So all of these positions are, I think, responsive to the needs of the agency. Of course, I have a much larger wish list, but I appreciate the General Manager Office's support in staffing this. And there's more, you could build out as far as, providing more stewardship for the land or doing more restoration. But I think these positions in particular, I think, help with the audacious part of CV camp in terms of doing that large scale restoration. as well as providing some of the on the ground day in and day out stewardship that we really need. And of course, I think the agricultural program probably doesn't need too much championing, but having someone who can really connect with farmers, can connect with stakeholders, can shake hands where they need to. That's just I think an evident need for the agency. And I think it's a good fit within the natural resources program because it is about land, it is about land management. And a lot of the work that we're planning, particularly in the CV camp area, is about how do we best integrate all these different functions, ag, natural resources management, public access, et cetera. So with that, I will take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Is there anybody on the Zoom that has a public comment? No. I love the idea because I think anything that's forward facing that faces the public, they want to see results, they want to see interaction. You know, I know we get comments about you're saying agriculture, well, where, you know, where are you farming? Speed of farms is hugely immensely popular because you could actually see the results and then public then made that direct correlation. So I think that's a great idea. In the watershed, just a tiny little story. When I sat on the Coyote Valley Specific Plan Task Force way back when, that area was looked at as a natural lake back then because of the natural flooding. So I'm really interested in how you want to kind of grow that watershed there. Okay. Anything? You have comments? No? Questions? No? Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now we have informational item on the Open Space Authority fiscal year 2022-2023 second quarter financial and work plan. Just thank you.
Good evening, directors. Justina Teen, Fiscal Services Officer. My item might not be as interesting as the previous three, but I've got pictures. And similarly, they were also from mostly from David Mock as well. Okay, so tonight we are reporting on the second quarter of fiscal year 22-23. Similar to previous quarters reportings, first section is a work plan status update. And by the end of the second quarter, which runs from October 1st to December 31st of last year, 2022, we've completed 2 of the 36 declared projects. Most of the projects are in progress and on track. 8 of the projects were declared delayed by the project managers or the respective departments, primarily due to staff shifting resources. But overall, we had another pretty good quarter. We renamed Mayan Oyakma. We launched the 22-23 Urban Grant Program. We also added another 80 acres to Croy Redwoods Preserve with a generous property donation from the Bay family. And we invested the last tranche of the agency's Idle Reserve Fund, which I'll also kind of touch upon as well in terms of opportune timing. The second section is the usual profit and loss budget versus actual, as well as the balance sheet. By the end of the second quarter, we expended a little over 6.8 million, which accounts to about 28% of the approved budget. More details are available in the exhibits, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions regarding the numbers. But now on to the last section. So as required by our investment policy, monthly statements are to be provided to the board on at least a quarterly basis. And as of December 31st, total market value of our portfolio was approximately 13.7 million. Now, this was a huge jump from our previous 7-point-something million. And that was largely due to us investing our last tranche that I mentioned previously, where we infused another 6 million into the portfolio. We incurred about $2,360 in management fees from our investment advisor. And our investment advisor did say that we invested our last large amount at a very optimal time. Not that we're timing the market or anything like that, but as rates were going up, back in around December, January. It kind of hit its peak before it kind of dipped a little, before it kind of went back up a little again. But we, just to kind of get a sense of that opportune timing, last quarter, we recorded a average coupon rate of 1.22%. But when we closed on December, our average coupon rate of our bonds were 2.23 from 1.22. This, of course, as coupon rates go up, the market value, unrealized loss on our portfolio, it kind of has an inverse relationship. So we have an unrealized loss that in a moment in time, it just shows that the bonds are valued less, but of course we typically will plan to hold to maturity. So holding to maturity, the average yield would be 3.05. And that was up from 1.84 from last quarter. So we kind of basically, a lot of the bonds that we purchased in December and January, they were at much higher yields, around the 4 or 5% interest rate. And so coupled with some that we were still holding at a lower rate from like a year ago at the 1 rate, that's why our average is around the 3%. But that's my update for Q2. And plus my pictures ran out, so that was about it. I'll add more next time. Any questions?
You have any questions? They all love the pictures.
I was hoping to distract that. Thank you.
There was no public comment on that item. Right. Okay. All right. Expenditure Plan Oversight Committee, and this
It is, thank you, Madam Chair. The Expenditure Plan Oversight Committee met March 14th to discuss 8 financial transactions, expense to Measure Q or Measure T, that they selected for review in January, plus a sampling of payroll expenses charged to a particular project. The committee's observations and recommendations will be compiled into their annual oversight report when the committee meets again in April. Exact date TBD, but they'll meet in April. And then that report will be brought to the board shortly thereafter. That's my update on the EPOC. Right.
Town manager, and more to report to.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since you stole our thunder earlier on this evening on some of our staff announcements, we'll have fewer to present, but just a couple that I have, and then I'll ask the other members of the leadership team what they have to present. But I just wanted to say, my other hat I wear is president of the board of Together Bay Area, which is the San Francisco Bay Region's conservation coalition that's focused on land conservation, climate resilience, and equity. And they are having their annual spring conference that I want to invite the board members to attend. We have quite a contingent of staff going from the OSA, which I'm very proud of. It's going to be May 10th at the Craneway Pavilion in Richmond, which is part of the Rosie the Riveter National Park. It's really the premier annual event where over 65 park, open space, water, conservation agencies, land trusts, state and federal agencies, tribal representatives, and community-based organizations come together. And the themes of the conference this year are workforce development, public funding, and building alliance with Native American tribes. So if you have any interest in coming, let me or Joelle know. Thanks to Mark and his team, OSA has begun briefings of newly elected officials at the cities and the county. Tomorrow we meet with Mayor Mahan to discuss the mayor's agenda and priorities of the Open Space Authority. And we're looking forward very much to meeting with you next Thursday to talk about the 2023-2024 work plan workshop, to look at work plan priorities for the next fiscal year and receive your input and recommendations. And I think the great reports that we had tonight from our staff really teed up hopefully your understanding of the kind of work and the priorities we're going to be working on in the next fiscal year. So with that, Matt, do you have any thunder left or no more thunder? Lee? No? No? Eric?
Good evening through the chair. My report really focuses on the recent storms that we've had, the ones that started in December through the early part of January. And then this last recent one that we had in March. The properties sustained a little slight damage to them in the first part of the year. We've since gone to FEMA and through Cal OES and our local OES operational emergency systems. And through that, we have direct access to funding from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Authority. And we have several projects that we're going to be submitting to them for review and potential funding. These include projects out at Rancho Cañada del Oro and also at Sierra Vista Open Space Authority, as well as reimbursing us for some deductibles from 2 vehicles that were damaged in storm-related events that occurred during that time. So we are in the process of meeting with them next week on Tuesday. We should get approval to move forward with those projects, and then we'll be hoping to finish those projects out within the next 18 months and be reimbursed for repairing the damage that was done to the properties. The recent storm that just happened in March created significant damage to the bridge over at Allen Rock Park and Sierra Vista Open Space Reserve. One of the footings got washed out from underneath. We're going to be exploring that option as well with FEMA and Cal OES coming up this probably early part of April and see if we can secure funding from that. They will pay for our insurance deductible on it, which are through Elizabeth. We learned that deductible is $750,000. So it will help us pay for that deductible, and then anything above that deductible our insurance would cover. That would not come from FEMA or Cal OES. Just like in the 2017 storms, we'll end up getting 75% back from FEMA, and then somewhere in the tune of, I think, 18%, I believe, through Cal OES. So our net result would be about 8% would come from Open Space Authority to do any of the repairs and damages for the 2 events that happened. That's the end of my report.
Thanks, Derek. Lucas or Aaron, anything more to report out tonight?
I guess the only thing would be to say that despite the storms, construction continues. I know you have where a lot of the work's happening on site right now for fabrication of the shade structures and interpretive signage. So it continues. We're going to be reevaluating the next couple of weeks at May 20th date, and just to see, at what point the site will be ready to have people out there for initial public access. And then continuing working internally with all the departments in the agency on planning for opening, working on brochures, websites, invitee lists for the grand opening in October, etc. So more to come soon on that one as well.
Thanks, Lucas. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think we're all waiting for spring. Please. Report from legal counsel.
Nothing to report, Madam Chair.
And board members, start over here, Director Kenneth.
Yes, long meeting, so I'll be quick. My report has to do with finding open space opportunities in Costa Rica. I think mentioned that, but it turns out there are plenty. So you may want to look at our neighborhood legislation. Tell me if this doesn't sound parallel to Coyote Valley. The country, it's a small country. It's about the size from Santa Rosa down to Hollister and from the ocean over to the Sierra Foothills. That is about the population of the Bay Area, about 5 million people. So it was totally agriculture. One of the largest coffee growing areas, pineapples, bananas, all that stuff. Then somebody came up with an idea for some ecotourism, or they called it eco. My name is a little greenwash, but it's there. But it's growing. So the fight is more resorts or more agriculture. And there are for sale signs in every stinking part of the country. Everybody wants to open up a hotel, a resort, to see the lunches. So. It was beautiful, but concerning. They can have it.
Thank you. Director Fly,
No report.
Director Animal. I will go really fast. Just want to bring something to your attention. As you know, I'm alternate to LAFCO. LAFCO is going to be holding its first in-person meeting. Woohoo! On April 5th. And there is a very interesting staff report that's out that you might want to pay attention to. It's the Gilroy USA Amendment, the rental investors who is scheduled for a public hearing, which has to do with annexation. So it will be very controversial meeting. They've already told us to plan for 4 hours. I assume there'll be a lot of public comment, but this is probably something to be on your radar. Because I think this came up in our discussions with housing element.
The chair was on the radar and I'll be submitting a letter in support of our codes.
Thank you. I knew you guys were gonna have it. That's my report. Director Alexander. No report.
Two quick items. One, in my day job, we are officially out of the drought. But conservation should remain way of life. And the other, one of the troubling things we saw during the storms was in the one of the mid-pen parks about a tree and one of the patrons. So hopefully we are paying, I know we're on it, but I just wanted to say it out loud that make sure we don't have that. How come what happened to us?
Director Gill.
Not about.
All right. Well, thank you all for a very fascinating meeting with lots of great information. So at this point, it's adjourned.